So I just wanted to go over what to expect to see on our Unit 2 atomic structure test in the next class period. Overall, it's going to be 24 questions, 15 multiple choice questions, 9 short answer questions, and I've gone through each section and listed out the types of questions by topic in each section. And so what I'm going to do here is just scroll through the packet side by side with a summary just to give you a better understanding about where you should be looking over and what types of problems to expect in each. So, first of all, in the multiple choice section, you're going to have a question or two about the scientists. So you need to know the specific scientists that made specific discoveries with certain experiments. That's how it's going to be phrased. You need to be able to identify the scientist from their experiment and or discovery. And then on page 2, we talked about the basic structure of the atom, all those subatomic particles. You need to be able to compare and contrast their properties, identify some key facts, properties about atoms in general, their nuclei, the electron cloud, putting together what you know about these subatomic particles. You also need to be able to understand and compare the atomic number and mass number, and isotopes and ions. And then, like we practiced, we're going to be giving you nuclear symbols, hyphen notations, and you're going to have to tell me about the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons in them, a lot like what we did on page 4. You definitely need to understand what the word neutral means. We did a little bit of practice of these types of ideas, comparing particles, properties of specific particles, scientists, their discoveries, and what they know about the atom. You need to be able to kind of assemble some of these things we talked about with those scientists with some of those basic properties that we know about protons, neutrons, and electrons, because that's how we know about them. So you need to be able to kind of assemble those separate facts into our into a single question. Like I already mentioned, you need to be able to take some of these notations, like hyphen notation, be able to tell me about some of these important numbers for the atom, and be able to take the atomic number and mass number. So take some of these numbers and tell us about the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons, or choose the correct notation that describes that atom. Now, pages 5 and 6 are actually not in the multiple choice section. You're going to see the average atomic mass stuff in the short answer section only. So I'm going to scroll right on past that for now, but you can expect to see a nice little table to solve for an average atomic mass problem there. And then, of course, there is a whole bunch of our electron configuration stuff in both sections. So in the multiple choice section, you need to be able to compare the s, p, d, and f orbitals with their general shapes, number of orientations, and how many electrons they can hold. You need to be able to analyze electron configurations to tell us how many electrons are in specific types of orbitals. So the multiple choice section isn't going to have you writing any of these out, but you need to be familiar enough with them that you could use one of those configurations to tell you some information, like what we did on page 13, about how many electrons are in p orbitals in certain elements, or how many are in the 4th energy level or the 3rd energy level, or in like d orbitals, that kind of thing. You need to be able to look at a configuration and be able to analyze it to tell me about numbers of electrons and in certain orbitals, or how many are unpaired electrons. Moving on to our ion notes on pages 15 through 17, you need to be able to identify kind of a lot of the stuff that we summarized in this periodic table down here. You need to be able to identify the number of valence electrons, how many electrons are being gained or lost by a specific element, and the general charge, especially if I give you the number of protons and electrons for a specific atom. So you need to be able to take a charge, find our protons and neutrons, predict the charge that a specific element would have, all of this stuff that we did here, including later on, it's going to be in the free response section, writing out a configuration of an ion. And then, of course, finishing up with our electromagnetic spectrum, you are going to need to be able to do a calculation in the multiple choice section. So you'll have multiple choice options, but we know what kind of issues y'all generally have, so don't expect to be able to kind of muddle your way through and, oh, I got an answer that's here. let me just choose that one because we know what kind of things you mess up, and we've put those answers in there too. So that's the multiple choice section. And like I said before, the free response section, the short answer section, which is a little bit more points than the multiple choice, but it's not as long. So the free response section, the earliest type of problem that you need to be able to do there is an average atomic mass calculation, something with one of these tables there. And there is a decent amount of electron configuration stuff in there, including things like at the top of page 13, where I give you a configuration, you identify the element. One where I give you, it's kind of like what we did on page 11 and 12, where I give you an element, and you're going to have to be able to write out multiple configurations. Electron configuration. When I say complete electron configuration, that's the part A thing that we did, starting from 1s2 all the way to that element's square. Orbital notation, all of those lines, labels, and arrows. Noble gas configuration, start at that noble gas, put it in those square brackets. The valence configuration, that was that shorter one where we only include the valence electrons. And then, of course, the Lewis dot diagram. So I could ask you for any of those for a specific element, and I will ask you. I will give you an element or two and have you do a few of those so that they all kind of correspond together. And then, like I already implied, you are going to have to write the electron configuration of an ion for a specific element. You're also going to have to explain the meaning of a given electron configuration term. And remember, this is in terms of the atom, not the periodic table. Electron configuration tells us about the arrangement of electrons in an atom, tells us very specific facts about those electrons. We use that shortcut, that analogy of, oh, it's about giving directions to the element's square in the periodic table. But that's not what it actually means. And if your answer on the test tells me about, oh, it's the area on the periodic table where the element, no, you're not getting points for that. That's the analogy. That's kind of our shortcut in our brain to understanding what we're doing and how to do it. It is not what it means. And then, of course, we need to be able to analyze a configuration to determine if they're correct or incorrect. And we did that several times in our packet. And I have some additional practice. Here they are. Correct or incorrect, fixing the issue. Here on page 13. I told you in class this was a lot of very test-like questions here. So definitely look over this stuff. Lots of electron configuration stuff on this test because we spent several days on it. It's an important idea moving forward in this class. Then you are going to have to do an electromagnetic spectrum calculation in the free response portion, which means that there's going to be points for you showing your work there, as well as the answer, of course, being rounded to the correct sig figs and having the correct unit. So make sure you look over our page 19 and 20 where you're doing those calculations and getting those correct units. And then there is one question from Unit 1. It's a dimensional analysis question. So it is going to be a multi-step dimensional analysis question, but I am going to give you all the necessary information that you need to solve it. So that'll be kind of like, well, this isn't multi-step here, but how I tell you 1 yard equals 3 feet here. Or like one of these questions where in the word problem, I give you all of the things that are equal to each other. You just need to take them and set them up together. So look over your pages 12 through 16. Got a lot of dimensional analysis stuff here that you can look for and look at to be ready for this. But this is actually, I believe it's a 7-point problem on the test. So it's not enough to fail you on its own, of course, but it's a significant chunk of points to just leave on the table if you just don't know how to do dimensional analysis. So that's everything that's on the test. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Hopefully this helps you study, look over your packet, look over the review, even if you don't have time to do all of the problems. I know I posted a blank one, but I also posted the key. So you can at least look over some of those problems and which topics they match up with here to help you prepare for that test.